the worst month for NATO troops in Afghanistan. UN report says Afghan civilian deaths also up by 24%. A U.S. service member was killed as the deadliest month for foreign troops in the Afghanistan war drew to a close, the U.S. military has said, with commanders promising to continue the fight despite the heavy toll. The latest death in southern Afghanistan brought to 40 the number of U.S. troops killed in July, by far the heaviest monthly toll in the 8-year-old war. The worst previous month for U.S. forces was in September 2008, when 26 were killed. The latest death occurred in a firefight with insurgents, or the Taliban, in southern Afghanistan on Thursday. The U.S. military has said at least 70 foreign troops have been killed in July, and Britain has suffered its worst battlefield casualties since the 1980s Falklands War, with the 22 troops killed in the month taking its total losses in Afghanistan to 191, 12 more than were killed in the Iraq War. Casualties spiked after thousands of U.S. and British troops this month launched major operations in southern Helmand Province, a Taliban stronghold and the center of Afghanistan's opium production. We understood the return of security to these areas would not be achieved without sacrifices, said U.S. Rear Admiral Greg Smith, chief spokesman for U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. For some, that has come at a high price, he said. A grim assessment. The United Nations also has said the number of civilians killed in conflict in Afghanistan jumped at least 24% so far this year, with bombings by insurgent and airstrikes by international forces the biggest single killers. In a grim assessment of the first half of 2009, the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said the Taliban and other anti-government militants have become more deadly by shifting from ambush attacks to suicide bombings, targeted assassinations, and roadside explosives, or IEDs. It also warned that more civilians would likely be killed and injured as insurgents try to battle a troop increase by the administration of President Barack Obama and seek to destabilize the country before presidential and provincial council elections. The summer is also typically the worst for fighting in Afghanistan. Well, actually, the country of Afghanistan has been destabilized for at least 8 years now. They say insurgent attacks are frequently undertaken, regardless of the impact on civilians in terms of deaths and injuries, or destruction of civilian infrastructure, the 21-page report said, attributing 595 civilian deaths to the Taliban and other anti-government elements over the first 6 months. Many of those died in suicide attacks or roadside bombs near civilian traffic, residential compounds, and marketplaces. Of course, the United States and Western powers have become much more deadly too, partly because insurgent groups are taking cover in residential areas. They say the Taliban and others are basing themselves in civilian areas so as to theoretically deliberately blur the distinction between combatants and civilians, or insurgents and civilians. Something on that order. Of course, this is not like a regular war. It's more, or similar more to like the Vietnam War in some kind of ways. Actually, it's probably worse than that. The report said international forces have given high priority to minimizing civilian casualties, but along with Afghan forces have killed at least 310 civilians. Of those, 200 were killed in 40 airstrikes. The total death toll, including those which couldn't be attributed to either side, of 1,013 civilians, is 24% higher than in the same period in 2008, and 48% higher than in 2007. So, in essence, it's getting worse. The United Nations tally is higher than an AP, Associated Press count of civilian deaths based on reports from Afghan and international officials. A new trend. Along with insurgents in Western nations, the government of Afghanistan shares responsibility for a rising toll in terms of civilian deaths and injuries and destruction of infrastructure, including homes and assets, which are essential for survival and the maintenance of livelihoods. The report said civilian deaths rose every month this year as compared with 2008 except February, as insurgent or Taliban forces sustained attacks throughout the winter, and a break from previous years when there was a lull in fighting. Other factors were the increased fighting in urban areas, more complex Taliban attacks, and the return of insurgents or militants fleeing warfare across the border in Pakistan. Also, the intensified operations by U.S. forces was also cited. May was the deadliest month, with 261 civilians killed. Insurgents have become increasingly sophisticated as well. The report said there has been a rise in coordinated attacks using explosive devices and suicide bombers to target government ministries and offices, with the intention of incurring the largest amount of casualties. And on the other side, the report said that 2/3 of the deaths caused by the Afghan government forces or its international allies came in airstrikes. Most casualties resulted from the use of close air support when troops met insurgents or the Taliban in villages, or when armed fighters took up positions in residential areas. International forces have been more forthcoming about acknowledging civilian casualties, but the report expressed continued concern about their capacity or willingness to provide information about some incidents. The United Nations said the report was compiled by its Afghan Missions Human Rights Unit and drew on independent monitoring and investigation of incidents where civilians were killed in conflict zones. And once again, when will this war end? When will they know that they have won? And again, what is there to win? Or they could just declare victory and leave like they want to do in Iraq. Anyway, these are more signs of the end times, transition days. There are many, many signs happening all around the world every day.